my own personal story is I was an undergraduate. I grew up in the UK, and I was at the University of London, and I signed up for a college on African history, which at the time was kind of a new thing in the 60s. But as a result of that, our professor managed to find some money to send us on an exchange to the University of Ghana for a semester. And I lived in Ghana for a whole semester, and I did some traveling around after that. I can relate to some of the comments in the last session about adjusting to the local food. I never quite could eat Ghanaian food for breakfast. It just didn't work for me. But otherwise, it was in many ways a life-changing experience. And when I came back after I graduated, I joined VSO, which is the British equivalent of the Peace Corps, and went to Nigeria and taught school there for a while as well. And so that was the beginning of a whole life story, which I won't go into right now. But that's just by way of introducing our lunchtime guest speaker, Ed Gragert. I understand that he got his very early exposure to another culture in Korea. He went there originally as a student.
17-year-old.
17-year-old, there you go. Never too young to start, right? So that's the point. Anyway, we are delighted to have him here with us today. He's going to be talking about education and technology in citizen diplomacy. Ed is the director of the Global Campaign for Education in the US, which is a coalition of national and local organizations working to ensure the quality education is available worldwide. Previous to that, he was director of an organization called I-EARN, International Education and Resource Network, going back to 1988. And he's also served as the executive director of an international youth exchange program with high school and community service volunteer exchanges with some 30 different countries. So he's also authored quite a number of books on this subject, has spoken and written widely about global education issues. As you may have guessed, Ed, from his academic background, has particularly an Asia experience. He studied Japanese political science, and then, as we heard, was in Korea. He has a PhD in Japanese history. So that's how he got started on this international journey. Before I ask him to speak, I just also want to mention that we are extremely grateful to CTN, that's our local cable channel, which is here in the room videoing this presentation. And we are very grateful to CTN for their interest and support for this day's work. Thank you. And now, Ed, thank you. Over to you. By the way, he tells me that this is the first time he's been in Maine in about 30 years. So I'm just glad the sun is shining.
Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, I normally actually don't need a microphone most of the time because I've learned how to project in different kinds of situations. I feel like Harold said this morning about the introduction piece, in terms of blowing things up a bit. I've only written a couple books, actually. And I was very fortunate. I mean, coming here and hearing what's gone on already today, it really feels like coming home because, as you might have gathered, I went abroad for a year in Seoul, Korea, in the mid-'60s, with an organization that started in 1948 using CIEE boats to send some of the first high school kids from Germany to the United States in 1948-49 after the war, the same year the AFS got started. And so hearing the experiences, both of the exchangees who were in Vietnam, but also Ignacio, are just very dear to me. And my family also hosted. So I've kind of come the whole I've spun the whole gamut of experiences because I'm so motivated, I'm so committed to the importance that all the work that you guys are all doing. And I went to Korea and came back with language skills. And I'm not sure, I can't imagine I was as good at Korean as Ignacio is in English. But that language stuck with me. Later on, I went in and continued, went back for another year and a half for research. And later became actually an interpreter for congressional delegations to Seoul to inspect elections and things like that. And so you never can't imagine how those experiences, I mean, I can go into a grocery store downtown Manhattan and get specials on food because I can speak Korean sometimes. And I never imagined it would come back to help me, like 50 years later. But 50 years, folks, in terms of having that impact in my life and actually be the reason I'm standing here today. I did go to university and study some stuff, but I was bored horribly writing. And so the organization that sent me to Korea, an organization called ICYE, asked me if I wanted a summer job in New York, and I said, yeah, I'll do anything but write. And so yes, I went down there and became the director the next year, kind of messing up other kids' lives like mine had been, all over the world, giving those experiences, opening those eyes, and kind of reshaping their horizons. And I didn't hear from the three exchanges today about how this, maybe because I stepped out for a minute, how this experience kind of is reshaping where you see yourself going, because I suspect it will. As someone who was channeled into physics and science and that kind of stuff in high school and ended up in Asian studies. Well, as also Harold said this morning, I jumped early on to an organization that was pioneering the use of technology in global education. And so he mentioned 25 years, and the organization that I helped found, called iEarn, was founded in 1988, that's 25 years ago, 26 years, to demonstrate that between the Soviet Union and the United States in those days, that young people could in fact work together, class to class, online, doing collaborative project work. Why? So that they would learn better, because it was peer-to-peer authentic audience interaction, but they'd also grow up to be global citizens so that they wouldn't shoot each other as adults. And from that history and purpose, the organization then grew. It has now organizations in 140 countries, and there's 2 million kids a day working online and 50,000 member teachers. So anybody who's looking for opportunities to network with schools that are already doing things online internationally, we'll come back to that. It's a great opportunity. But then I realized, and I'm going to come back to this too, that I was really privileged, not only in the physical exchange piece, as some have pointed out this morning in terms of cost and all those things, but also internationalizing U.S. education, as important as that is, there are also a lot of kids out there, as we heard Amy say today, 1% of those girls graduating from secondary school. Many kids in this world don't have access to an education. And so to me, those are all integrally related. And so that's what I'm doing now, is mobilizing folks in the United States to realize that it's important that all young people have the right to an education worldwide. And today I'm going to focus a little bit on the action component. And we're going to talk a little bit about, here's this. This is the 1966 version of a selfie. And I must say, those Tanzanian uniforms were a lot nicer than mine for school. But traditionally, physical exchanges have been, in fact, seen as the way to gain global competency. And I was clearly one of the beneficiaries of that. But I found soon that we were really some of the very fortunate few. Here's some statistics. And I'm sure some of you know what CSIET is, the Council on Standards for International Educational Travel, kind of the Better Business Bureau for the high school exchange field in the United States. And every year they do statistical rankings to show what's happening in terms of both in and out of the United States for semester and year-long exchanges. Now, not short-term. And so they do these rankings, and you can see Maine at 14. All right, congratulate yourself. Those are the states of young people going abroad. Look at this 5-year or 9-year comparison. 52, I'm reading the Maine line, and some of you maybe not be able to see it back there, but it says in 2003, 4, 52, and then 85, 80, 50, 70, 39, 39, 42, 33. These are not really growing numbers, folks. And it's obviously not just Maine, because you're at the top of the list of states. And when I'm going to go back to that same list, I'm more interested in this number way down here, which is the total for all states. And that total for 2011-12, this is semester and year long, not short term, was under 1,400. 1,400 U.S. high school students going abroad for a semester or a whole year in that year. And yet, we have 20 million high school students in the United States. So we're not even moving the meter at all. And so, struck us as how can we, if in fact we feel that global competency is key, one of those 21st century skills that all of our young people have to have, along with being able to work together, collaborate, technology, familiarity, languages, then how can we make sure that all of our young people have those skills of global competency and awareness, and not just a privilege like me who was able to go abroad. And so we started a movement to create what we call Exchange 2.0. A bunch of the organizations that are working online with various kinds of technology and formed Exchange 2.0 to show that there are different models that can be used to internationalize U.S. education and to allow young people to take action. And I'm going to keep coming back to that because, when you really have to demonstrate what you've learned by implementing it, by taking action, that's when you actually demonstrate and that's when you actually learn, because you're able to put together what came out of the classroom or the interaction into action. So I'm going to focus on that. This is you're I'm sure all familiar, this is the framework that the Asia Society and CCSSO put together for global competency. Four kind of pillars. One is global awareness, kind of building just information about each other, investigating other cultures. 2 is to listen respectfully to other cultures. And 3 is then to share your own perspective. And then 4, taking action. And all too often, we focus on the first 3, but not the 4th one. So building awareness, there's lots of great things that are happening with building awareness. You guys familiar with that map? It looks a little weird, right? Anybody know why it looks weird? Pardon me? Because it's correct. Aha. Why is it correct? Why is it more correct than other maps? Okay. And so, yeah, if you look at a Mercator map, first of all, the equator is not in the middle of the world. Did you know that? Did you know the equator is actually not in the middle of the world? That's what Mercator says, anyway. But when you put the equator in the middle of the world, and you put the approximate size of the landmass of the continents and countries, the world looks very different. Now, the shape is distorted, don't get me wrong. Every flat map has to distort in some way. But the world looks very different when you see this, and Africa is huge. So huge, I love this map, that inside Africa, you have China, you have the United States, you have India, all the various countries of many parts of the world all fit inside that one continent. And yet oftentimes, how many people have you heard talk about Africa as a country instead of a continent? And anyway, so awareness, that's the first step. Maybe this is a function of, I went to Korea, in Japan, but I came up with the acronym RICE, for respectful, inquisitive, collaborative engagement. But the next step is then to engage, to interact. And there are lots of examples of how you can do that. We're going to look at some today in a respectful way and inquisitive, being curious about the other culture and society, being collaborative, not being one directional, but two directional, and to be really engaged. And so I throw out that rice because I think about my food every day. Okay, now we're talking about food a lot today, aren't we? Collaborative. We are convinced that collaboration works in building global competence. And I'm going to give you a little exercise here. Here's 12 photos. Without talking to anyone next to you, I want you to come up with a number of faces that you recognize, all right? Now, it may not be you know exactly the name or anything like that, but faces that you recognize. How many of these people do you know? Don't talk next to each other. Okay, we got a number? All right. I'm going to ask you to hold your hands up. Hold them up as long as you can, okay? And I'll start off with one. And to see how many of these faces you recognize. So how many out there recognize at least one face out there? All right, keep them up as long as you can. How many recognize two? Three. Four. Names and hands are coming down. 5. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. That was a 9.5, I think, back there, right? Okay, now what I'd like, I didn't see any more, is that it, right? I've never yet had a 12. I'd like you to talk to the people next to you. Who do you know in common up there? Who are these guys? Compare notes. Okay. All right, the first observation is you seem to be having fun. Learning can be fun, you know. And the second is that it was hard to stop you because you're talking together, you're learning with each other on this. And so now if I asked you to raise your hands, I suspect, I'd be very disappointed otherwise, that you would be able to hold your hand up longer. Because obviously the wisdom that's in this room and the people next to you, if you had more time, you'd know them all. Because the odds are that somebody in this room, collectively, you'd be able to name all 12 of them. And that's the philosophy of my old organization, iEarn, that there's wisdom everywhere. And if we can somehow get our kids to have access to that wisdom and to share their own wisdom, then we're going to be able to deal with the world's issues a lot easier. And so collaboration for us is the key. And that engagement. So going beyond just interaction, going to learning about, but to actually engaging with. And of course, if I didn't do this, you would shoot me. All right.
You were right.
Pardon me?
I'm saying I know who he is, but I can't be right.
And you were right.
I never watched TV.
Ah, my poor dog. Okay. All right, what I'd like you to, so tell me, is there a name up there you don't recognize? Sure, who is it?
Mate.
So, what you, Matai? Okay, I mean, Hingari? Yeah, who is she? Who is she? Yes, trees. What country?
Kenya.
Okay, and why is she why was she famous? She friended trees. She was the first Nobel Peace Prize for an environmental project in Kenya. All right, what's another one that you don't know? Sure. Pardon me? There's always somebody in the crowd, right? Okay. Tony Blair, folks? Former Prime Minister of what country? UK. And so, just so that you know, you're proving my point right now, right? One more that you don't know.
The bottom one.
Bottom.
Gragert into Chum. Who is she?
She's the new president of Congo?
No.
We have an answer here.
We should have, because we dealt with that country quite a bit actually today.
She's a Guatemalan woman.
Exactly. An author, Guatemalan, also with the Nobel Prize. And so, like I said, if we had more time, I'm sure that you would, as collectively, know them all. And so, I mean, actually there's whole books written on this crowd, the wisdom of the crowds thing. So literally, all of our students are going to, and all of us are going to learn or gain by learning with each other. But again, I come back to that action, that global competency isn't complete without it. And so I want to give you some examples of what young people are doing to take action on the learning that they are gaining. And this is just from a second grader, okay? And it's from a long time ago. This second grader and her class of others were working with an organization online with other grades, elementary school kids, on a project with Nicaragua. And it dealt with an organization, El Porvenir, that builds wells, digs wells and uses bicycle pumps parts so that there's no reliance on fossil fuels. And so they would work in their community and dig wells. And so that the girls, it's always the girls folks, not the boys, the girls wouldn't have to go spend 3 kilometers walking each way to fetch water for the family. And so the second graders were out there in Pullman, Washington, and they put together a haunted house, because they wanted to charge their colleagues, second graders, third graders, fourth graders, 25 cents to go through a haunted house so they could raise enough money to send and build 1 pump. And the head of our organization, we went out to Pullman, and he said, "What are you doing?" He says, "Don't you realize that we are making a difference in those kids' lives in Nicaragua? Because we are helping them get clean water to their community, whereas they don't have it now." And so they clearly got it. Not only had they learned the issues about all the sustainability issues and fossil fuels and water and waterborne diseases, and were taking action in their own community. Just a microcosm of what's possible. And then think of this one. Right now there's 57 million, including those that we heard about this morning, elementary school age kids who don't have access to a quality education. 57 million. About 40% of those are disabled. Now this number has dropped a lot. When the MDGs were first announced almost 15 years ago, it was 120 million. So we're making progress. So the kind of work that we heard about this morning, there are organizations across the United States that are trying to address this issue. But the numbers have started to level off because now the kids are separated by geography, by language. Kids in local languages who speak local languages then end up in a school that teaches in a different language. That happens a lot of places. DRC, for example, we mentioned, Haiti, for example, and Senegal, for example. And so language, but also disabilities and just the barring of access to kids. And another 70 million teenagers are not in school. 70 million. 4 million of those are in our country. So it's not just an issue out there, it's an issue for all of us. And so what we do is show kids how they can take action on this issue. And so later on, we have what's called a lesson for all, and we did a curriculum based on Math to Common Core and all those things, on how young people at the K3 and 4-6 and high school levels can learn about this issue and can take action by working with organizations all across the United States. And this is how we promote, actually, organizations like you heard this morning that are part of our coalition, to give them very specific examples of what you could do, how they could make a difference. These are free, downloadable for educators, and happy to talk to you about how they could be used in the classroom. action? Yeah. And so what you're doing here and during the next 12 months, working with organizations that are building schools, as you've seen this morning, who are getting kids out of the dump and into schools, and by working all together, collectively, we can make an incredible difference, and the young people can take action. So I come back to Rice, and in that engagement, the students share information, but also ask tough questions. And kids, they see something like this and they can't believe, especially if they're middle school aged 11 and 12, that millions of girls are forced into, it's not really marriage, forced into bondage really, at that age. And therefore they're no longer in school if they were. And that resonates with girls and boys in this country. So it's allowing them to interact with people in these countries that have this kind of direct experience. Because you can read it, you can see it in a video, but until you start talking to people who have a personal story. So asking those questions. And then they ask us, is it really true that 25% of US high school students don't graduate in 4 years? Or 50% in New York City? 50%. And you realize the United States is, of course, number 19, well, we're way down on a lot of lists, but 19 in early childhood education compared to other countries. And so they're dealing with these tough issues that they're getting from peers around the world, and they're asking tough questions. And so then they obviously talk about that, and then they take action. Here's some examples of what kids are doing, some more examples. You may know of Build On. Have you heard of it? It's an organization that has high school chapters across the country, and they have integrated the issue of lack of education they started in Tanzania, in Malawi rather, and then moved to Tanzania and Kenya. And they actually build schools in collaboration with the community, but the kids go and build the school with the community. Comes back, they're not graduating, so they make sure that they do it as either freshmen or sophomores, so that they're coming back into the school and it fits back into the curriculum. And they have found that their kids graduate at a much higher rate. They're dealing with fairly low-income communities in Build On. And so they're showing that not only is an awareness of the issue, but also that they were able to play a role in dealing with that issue by going abroad. And those that don't go abroad then connect online and hear back from the folks, like we heard today, in terms of what the experience was all about. So not only does it make a difference there, it benefits all of us. Schoolgirls Unite, anybody hear them? This is an organization of girls about 11, 12, 13 in a number of cities. They started outside Washington, D.C., and they were resonating with girls in Mali. And they said, of course, they studied the issue, they were enacting, they sent some folks from the school and their club, it's an after-school program really. And they said, what can we do? And so they looked into their community and said, here's something we can do. Maybe. Now, this is wireless. I'm not sure what the network's going to look like.
Next, you're going to meet some students who are using their skills to make a difference globally and locally. They're members of 3 organizations that are run by students themselves, and they're all leaders in their own right. Check them out in our next segment, In Focus.
Help us give the gift of education to girls in Mali, Africa.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. This we kind of created to change something that we saw was wrong, which is the lack of girls in schools around the world.
And what we're trying to do is we're trying to raise money for Schoolgirls Unite.
These bags are Malian fabric, but they're made by us here.
We're half a scholarship program in Mali, Africa, and we're also, we hold leadership programs in Mali as well as the United States. As of now, we're sending 85 girls to school. Hopefully, after tonight, we can send a little bit more.
Question for us is, how do we deal with the new volunteers? Because I think that's a major issue. Like,
It's a community people really like. They love coming to the meetings and seeing everybody. Just being around other activists is very inspiring. Our sister chapter, they do advocacy the same way we do lobbying. They actually travel to the villages and they talk with the girls that are getting scholarships. And they talk with the tutors and the parents to make sure that children, the girls, are staying in school.
Hi, it's Mira. I don't know if you can see, but I wanted to show you our concert poster.
We try to have a video conference where we can actually talk face to face with the people that we've been working with for all these years.
Salut, my friend Melissa.
It amazes a lot of the newer members because it's something, they're like looking through this window into an entirely different place to see people who are doing the same thing that they are. We decided that we both wanted to do a project on child marriage. And so we did video, and we had a child marriage petition, which we took.
I'm going to stop it there. But what do you get from this? I mean, what are the benefits? What are they gaining? So, I mean, obviously, kids are going to school, but you heard leadership issues, you heard advocacy. I mean, you can see, I just stopped on this line because they're taking an advocacy role in Washington, D.C. with our Congress to get legislation enacted that impacts girls everywhere. So they're playing an advocacy role. They're also playing a direct action role after they learned. Any other comments, any observations? Is this something, oh, I forgot to do this, you know? I was going to have you go this, or this in terms of these kinds of activities that might be done in schools in Maine. So how about this one? Is it a this? Yeah. Very simple. I'll see if I can get back. So, and they do a lot of materials, but a lot of community outreach and advocacy with Congress and elsewhere. Here's another group.
This is the letter that I wrote. Dear Mr. Rodkin, I am writing to you to find out where you get your company's food supplies from and what the working conditions are.
One of the things that I personally wanted to accomplish in my class is that I think our students need to understand how to be good global citizens.
I hope your company doesn't get their supplies
because that's something that's really going to carry with them for the rest of their lives. The teacher's guide was very important for me to get all the information in one place where then I can direct the kids on how they can discover what the problems were and how to find solutions to hunger. Our class read a new...
This is quite a long video, but the thing I get out of this is one, of course, they're gaining the awareness of the issue. They're looking at root causes. They're taking their action, but they're realizing the problem is here as well as there. And so they were writing letters to those corporations to say, what are you doing? What is it in your policy that is actually playing a constructive role dealing with root causes of hunger? And so advocating, arguing here, because that's where a lot of the problem was. And for me, that's a big lesson for 6th graders to learn and then to take that action.
This is the letter that I wrote.
No, enough. Oh, by the way, that's an up, level, down. Is that something that's doable here? Looking at root causes of hunger, engaging with kids all over the world in their communities as to some of the issues we talked about actually again this morning. Sure.
Can I just say that the more and more we move toward testing the hell out of our kids and Common Core and all this other crap, the less and less opportunity we have to do this stuff in the classroom.
Yep. And that's why, I mean, and, you know, I've been around long enough to know that I thought No Child Left Behind was lousy times, but this is no better. And you know, that's why you have to give teachers the tools to help them do this as easily as possible. And it's not in terms of the content, it's the issue of how do I justify to the principal? How do I justify to this no longer state standards, but the Common Core? How do I justify it when my kids are not going to be asked for these questions on the test? And of course, then it gets into the critical thinking issues. It gets into global studies. It gets into some of the issues in critical writing and the skills in writing, reading and writing. The research is there. By doing this kind of work, they go up dramatically. At least one grade at the elementary level, a grade and a half, by doing this kind of authentic peer interaction on these kinds of issues. And
So well that the young children will start telling adults that they don't need to do the testing anymore.
wow, that sounds like paradise to me. It's great. And that's also the organization I used to be involved with, iEarn. They have 250 of these projects happening at any one time, all globally, all online, interactively. And they also map each of the projects to the Common Core so that when a teacher says, or to a parent even, why are you doing this? Why are my kids doing this instead of studying dates and figures and things? They can have the resources to help them explain how this, in fact, makes their students, their child's education better in terms of the skills that are going to come out of those tests, but also be more important in life. My doll. My doll comes from Mali. And this project, the kids heard in several countries, but including in the United States, heard from the kids in Mali that they had no computers in schools. And this is in a network where everything relies, of course, on access. And so they said, and they worked together, the students in various parts of the world, and said, well, hold it, why don't we form a joint venture? You're talking 14, 15-year-olds, a joint venture internationally? And so what they came up with is, what if in Mali you do what you have lots of and that's skills in traditional doll making. You have lots of things that could be used, that are recycled and used to make the dolls. You have a culture that the rest of the world should know about. And so why don't you make the dolls, and we'll market those dolls all over the world. And the money will then go back to Mali. Don't take my doll, okay? And then we'll market the dolls, and we'll learn about all sorts of issues. Well, they didn't think that, but the teachers knew that. They'd all of a sudden have to learn about budgeting. They had mathematics, folks. They had to learn about customs and duties and things like that. And is it legal to ship things like this without permission from governments? And they had to know about how many do we produce? Is there a market for them? And so they had to go through all of that. It was a real joint venture. But it was a joint venture that had a win-win solution. And the kids not only learned about education issues in Mali, they learned about the culture of Mali, but they are also able to share in getting computers in the classroom. Those dolls actually, they all came with a little descriptive thing about the color of the fabric and things, and some of them have musical instruments as well. They were sold in the National Geographic office in their store in Washington, D.C. And imagine the pride of those students as well. So you've got all of these pieces that are wrapped up in a simple, not simple, project between high school students on a joint venture. Great for business class, right? Could this be done in Maine? All right. How about if you studied an issue like deforestation, and you worked together with kids in other countries about that issue and what it did to soil erosion, what it did to all the other issues, oftentimes just cutting down trees to burn, to cook in many parts of the world. And so the kids who worked on one project between India and various other countries said, look, what we want to do is educate our community. Simple, right? Well, they learned animation, they learned all of the things that go into making a PSA, and they get it aired on local TV, self-esteem, and they're educating the local community about the issue of deforestation. They're taking action on the learning that they share between countries. Another school in India was studying with interacting with kids around the world on girls' issues. She can't go to school. Something like that doable in Maine? Do you think the local TV station might air PSAs like that done by students about global issues? Obviously in a fun way. Yeah. We have a commitment. Here's another one. Kids in Canada said, hold it. Girls everywhere, we talked about this a while ago, are forced to walk huge long distances to get water in most countries, and never the boys. And they're often pulled out of school for that purpose. And just like the Nicaragua water pump thing. And somebody said, look, we're spending billions of hours each week playing games. And yet, and these girls and women are spending 200 million hours collecting water. There's a connection here. And so they developed a game, an iPhone game, well, I guess Android too now, that brings this point home. And the game, Maya, who is in an Indian community, is in school, and then the pump in the community breaks. So her mother comes in the game, this is the opening scenes, and drag Maya out of school and tell her to go get the water, 5 kilometers or so down the way. And so, of course, she's very sad. And then the game player has to overcome the obstacles for Maya to help her get the water. And it's all the, they struggle between being too, pedantic and pedagogical versus fun. They came down on the fun side. And so, jumping over things, shooting down things, all with a good cause. Then Maya eventually gets more water, is able to get back into school, but then something happens again to the pump, so she gets taken out again. And so each level becomes harder, but also windows pop up with little things that kids have supplied all over the world in terms of the importance of water for girls' education. And then finally, I only got to level 2. Anyway, but in the final end, if you actually win the game, she gets an engineering degree, so she comes back to the town and fixes the pump. And so it solves the problem. Now, is that doable here? I mean, kids are designing games all the time. Go play the game, it's free, downloadable. So
What's the name of it?
it's Get Water. So getwatergame.com. It's a fascinating game, and it's a way to reach young people where they're at, not where we would like them to be, in terms of introducing these issues and coming up with solutions through action. And then again, I come back to this one about what can young people do. We go out all the time in our work to places like this. Someone was here from our organization a while back and did a screening of the movie Girl Rising. How many have seen the movie? Yeah, and if you ever, because 10 times 10, the people who made that movie are part of our coalition, we can get it to you for free. Otherwise they charge. And so you can hold your own screenings at your university, at your high school as well. And it's a movie that highlights 9 girls in 9 countries and the hurdles that they have to overcome to get an education. Documentary, very famous folks, women who are narrating the stories of these 9 girls. And so we do those kinds of things, and then people come up to us after and say, well, I know, but what can I do? What's there for me to do? And so we have several options. One is that we bring young people to Washington, D.C. for advocacy training, free of charge. 3.5 days, we bring them to Washington, D.C. Now, right now, we've been dealing 18 to 25-year-olds. We've done it 3 times. We're doing it twice a year.
It's the next one.
What's this?
Hi, Sasha. Our president serves
That's not me.
jobs in the
I wonder. That's funny.
March 2018.
There it is. No, it isn't. Well, I don't know what it was, but somebody took some action. Well, I like the music, whatever it is.
If you go past the screen.
Interesting. I'm not doing anything to turn it off either. Okay. Anyway, maybe it's embedded in this photo. And so that's one thing we do. So if you know of young people who could benefit and in the work that they do here, because we give them the training. They get 3 days of, these are the issues, these are the players, whether it's the World Bank or USAID, or here's how you message the media, and then they go up on the Hill and they arrange meetings with their members of Congress and say, this is an issue that I'm passionate about, and I feel that you should be doing this. And then they come back to their home communities and be local advocates in whatever organization they're working for. We don't care where they're working. And so if you know young people that work with you who could benefit from that, that's one thing. We also give them a chance to highlight everything they're doing across the country, because all too often we have a sense that maybe all of these global issues are really only dealt with people in Washington, D.C., or a very small part of our population. And so what this is a chance to highlight what's happening all across the country, in this case for education issues globally. And so the map starts lighting up as to what kids are doing all over the world or what adults are doing, to give them a sense that this is something that the nation cares about and not just Washington, D.C. And then finally, we're going to start a new program that's going to involve virtual volunteering. Because as I started this whole talk today, is that there are very few who can actually go out physically and do things. And yet so many people want to help and have things to offer and have things to learn. And so we're going to be starting and partnering with our member organizations around the world, whether it's CARE, Save the Children, Oxfam, or Safe Passage maybe, where they have got projects in education, and we will then help them link up young people across the United States that want to play a constructive role virtually in that education, whether it's mentoring, whether it's helping to design things, whether it's simply buddy peers, self-esteem building, whether leadership skills, but we're going to create a national program for that to happen with a number of organizations. So again, enabling more young people to take action. And can you imagine what the world would be like if the 20 million high school students in this country could in some way take action, whether it's by physically going somewhere or virtually interacting with and contributing to the health and education of young people worldwide. Can you imagine what the world is going to look like? And I'm convinced that that is the future. And so I come back to those 4 global competency pillars. And again, I want to circle the take action, because that's when students demonstrate what they've learned and their level of commitment. And that's what gives me hope. Because this last year in my own field of education internationally, with the tragedy of Malala, with Girl Rising Moving things, there's a rising interest in ensuring that young people all over the world get an education. And so when I see things like they're happening all across our country in the community level and the school level, I have a tremendous amount of hope. And so I want to just thank you for that time today to share that with you.